All right, we're back. We're back in the ever progressing saga here of both the fireplace and the crown molding. And right now we're going to be focusing on crown molding, which the last time we were all together in a video, Tom was finishing up the crown molding around the fireplace, which you can see has come out just perfect on both sides of that. And then he's proceeded to go around the perimeter of the room, and he's got some other pieces up here. We're going to talk about them in a second and some of the details. This thing is having trouble focusing again. I guess I've asked it to do too much. But there's come on camera, come on, work with me here. There you go. So he's got a backing board up on that piece of wall. In fact, that was a two-piece backing board. You can see the seam up there, and that's not a big deal, all right, Tom? Because that's behind the trim anyway.
Right.
But Tom was pointing out something that I think is interesting, because I was looking at the backing board, and the one on this end has got this angle cut, because the board on this side will have a flush cut that goes all the way to the wall, and Tom puts that angle cut in there on purpose, because then that acts as a second pair of hands. When he's up there trying to fit the other backing board on the opposite side, then he can kind of lay it in there and it'll hold it in place a little bit while he's positioning backing. I think I can show that really good over here. You can see where this backing board was cut, and there's you can see the molding and how it fit right in there, and how because of that angle cut, it could kind of rest on it like that was a helper hand tacked into the wall. So that's a clever little, that's one of the tricks of the trade you wouldn't normally have thought of. I might not have done that. In fact, I know I wouldn't have done that, and then I'd have been struggling if I was by myself to fit all these boards up there and tack them. One thing we'll draw attention to right now is Tom has this seam here, right? Now Tom, with those two pieces done a simple 45-degree cut?
Right, those are done with a simple 45. It's the easiest way to do it. You have to kind of match them up, and it's best to match them as 45. When you get more complex, like you use a corner cut or something like that, then it's a lot harder to get them. And plus, if you can't get them to match up, then the margin of error is greater too.
So, to my eye, that looks like an acceptable gap, knowing you're going to put caulk in there anyway. Is that the kind of gap you shoot for?
Yeah, obviously you wanted it perfectly tight if you can do that.
Okay.
But that would be pretty impossible in that case, because the board on the right is actually a little bit larger than the board on the left.
Yeah, Tom was saying the board over here was a little bit thicker.
Yeah, they're all bought at the same place at the same time, but it's wood.
It's wood.
And you have no idea when they got the boards.
Yeah,
you have them all at the same time or not.
I mean, that profile is cut in there in some kind of a planer joiner at a mill, and they might have set it up differently between one lot to another, and they're supposed to be the same, but they're done within the acceptable tolerance. So I asked Tom, I said, well, what'd you do with that? That means the one on the left was a little bit thinner, and Tom said,
hey, put a little shim in.
because that'll cause it to stick out a little further from the wall, but then at least the two visible surfaces will be aligned with one another, which will make the caulking, again, that much more effective. And you can just use a little extra caulk where necessary underneath where the shim has been placed, and might have created a bigger gap, and no one will ever notice the difference anyway. So there you go, another trick of the trade. Excellent. So you're really moving along here with this room, and you're ready to put up a couple more pieces today.
Correct.
Excellent.
Correct. Now, a couple things, well, actually one thing for sure. I don't know if you remember, but the first time I was back cutting a board, it was really easy. The second time, not so easy. And here's the reason for it. If you look at this, the back of this board, you can see that there's a seam across here.
Oh.
And what this is a piece of finger joint wood. So it's multiple pieces of wood, finger joined together, okay, and then routed out or whatever they did to create the actual molding.
Oh.
So this board might be easy to cut, this board, not so much. So it's just something to keep in mind, because if you get one that's really tough, if you can, cut it differently or cut it somewhere else so that you can get a easier go of it.
And you're really referring here to the miter cut that you had to make by hand?
Yes.
Not the-
When you have to back cut this board.
Right, the back cutting,
Right.
okay.
And it can get pretty tedious to do them on a piece of wood that has either
Right.
knots in it or.
There you go.
Or is tight.
Clearly,
The other thing about this, the difference is, this is finger joint because it's primed, or they prime it because it is finger joint.
Oh.
You can't stain a piece of wood that is finger joint, because you'll see all the finger joints.
Right.
So when they're using finger joint, they prime it. This is actually cheaper than a non-prime board, okay, which kind of doesn't make sense.
Because they have to paint it.
Well, right, they have to paint it. That's an extra step for them. However, they can use pieces of wood as opposed to needing to have one continuous wood.
One really long
You
piece
save-
of wood, yeah.
Right, so you save a lot of money, quite a bit of money. They do some of the work for you. The price you pay is that sometimes it's pretty hard to cut.
Gotcha. Okay, that's the trade-off, is that the mating pieces of wood may have different densities or knots in them or grain patterns or whatever.
Exactly.
And when you go to back cut it by hand, which is that little operation we saw you do, it can make that more aggravating.
Right.
Coming down through it with a regular power saw is no big deal. Goes through it like butter either way.
It will go through it either way.
Yeah, okay. But the other one is the more difficult. Okay.
Now, one other thing, what I've done already is I've cut all my ends that need to be mitered in any way,
Okay.
and I cut them before I did anything else. So if you remember, I had the saw set for the angles, 2 angles, one
Yes.
the bevel and one the miter. And rather than taking that off and then trying to get it exactly where it was, I cut all the boards that needed to have that miter.
Okay.
So cut them all, put them off to the side, go back and cut them out as I needed to, but at least I know the angles are the same.
Right.
And I did
Right.
the same thing with the outside corner. This is going to be over in that wall like that. This is another one here. You want to make sure that you cut those with the same.
Okay.
thing. Now, the other thing is, when I'm matching the boards,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to do them all at once, but you have to make sure that the 2 boards that you do are done at the same time. Because you want to make sure that that angle is consistent
Okay.
between the 2 boards that have to be joined.
So this required a little bit of actually, I'm going to guess you had to go around the perimeter of the room almost board by board and decide ahead of time which one was going to get flush cut and go right up against the wall and which one was going to need this compound cut.
Exactly.
And then once you did that, you could rough out the dimensions of each one and then do all the compound cuts like you were saying.
You're kind of cutting one end, so you just have to make sure you have
Okay.
long enough 2 pieces. For
Right.
instance, up there is a little bit over 16 feet, 16.4.
Okay.
So I used a 9 foot and an 8 foot, so that's 17
Right.
feet, so I have a little bit of play. And, so as long as you have sufficient wood, so you don't have to have 3 pieces, obviously, it's easy to lay out, but you do have to take into consideration the corners.
Yes.
Which ones go all the way to the wall,
Right.
and which ones.
Right.
And again, it's easier to put it up if you got that,
Right.
hold it at that.
Yes,
When you're
yes.
doing it by yourself.
Cool.
All right, so
Excellent.
here's where we're at. We've got these 2 boards cut. One of them is the left-hand side of that dual board over, going towards the door over there. The other one is the corresponding piece coming out the doorway. So that's an outside corner. That's the
Okay.
only outside
Yes.
corner we
Yes.
have other than the ones that were already cut.
Gotcha.
Okay, so that's the first piece to be done, because the outside corner is obviously the one that you can't hide the defects as well as you can elsewhere. So if you can get the outside corners right, your job will look.
Be easier. Yeah.
Yep.
Less goop, less caulking to make up the difference.
Well, and sometimes you can't really caulk. I mean,
Really?
You got
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
3/4 of an inch seam.
Yeah, right. That's too much.
Take them down and cut them again.
Cut 'em down,
Start
yeah.
over.
Okay.
So they want to kind of make sure that the outsides are really the things you focus your time
Okay,
on. Okay?
excellent.
All right, so you're gonna be my assistant today here too.
All right, should I put the camera on a tripod so that they can be watching two monkeys at once, or can we just show them the finished
Well,
result?
we can always tape it and throw it away later.
All right.
Or we can tape it and keep it, depending if
I'll-
nobody falls off a ladder.
I like that idea best. Okay, let me go get the tripod, and maybe you folks listening to this will never see that part. Depends if I fall on my butt and we decide not to put that in there or not. You just might see the finished results. We'll see. Hang on.
All right.
All right, so I know you're waiting to see the two guys on the step ladders, but before we do that, Tom was pointing out to me that along this wall, you can see all kinds of blue tape. Now, some of them should be obvious to us by now. They mark off where all the studs are. But he's also got 3 little horizontal pieces of tape up on the wall. And each of those are marking his, what was it, 3 3/4?
3 3/4.
3 3/4 distance using that little wooden tool that I've showed you before that he handmade from the ceiling. So he knows where the 3 3/4 lines are relative to the ceiling, and he made sure, right, that they were level using that little laser.
Laser line to make sure that they are indeed level, because can't guarantee that the ceiling is.
Right, right. Which does that mean that one of them may not actually be 3 3/4 inches from its ceiling where it's located if it's been?
It's possible, but in this case, I just put them up at 3 3/4.
Okay.
The laser line, they seem to be perfect.
Oh, okay. So they did seem to be perfect. So you didn't have to compromise anything there.
Right, there were no
Okay.
holes or high spots, low spots in the ceiling.
And those tape lines, and are there some on the other side over here too?
No, not yet.
Oh, yeah, there is.
Maybe one.
Yeah, there's one up here. And those pieces of tape will help make sure when he's positioning the pieces of molding that they're sitting at the right height relative to the ceiling. Because if you remember on these pieces, there's a little bit of, you could screw things up and make, install them, nail them in such a way that they're not exactly 3 3/4 if you don't have a reference line. So he's got those done for the piece that we're just about to put up. Okay, hang on. All right, so you want the bottom edge to be right to the top edge of that tape?
Yep.
Okay,
You got it?
yeah, you do that. A little bit uncomfortable getting up on that next step.
Yeah, you don't want to be in the next step. Okay. I mean, once you get it up
All
there.
right, that's it.
Okay, you good?
Let me try one more.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Wow. Wow. Okay, go back towards you.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep, slow it through here.
Okay, you got it?
Yep.
Okay, if you can get slowly let go.
You sure?
Yep. Okay,
That's it?
that's it.
All right,
I'm gonna go over there and,
see if I did it right.
yeah, check up on you.
From the angle I was looking, it looked good, but I don't know. You sure?
I'm sure.
Okay. Tom says I had it perfectly positioned.
All right, so.
He's an awfully nice guy. I'm not sure I believe him, but if he says so.
So.
All right, now that he's got that one kind of tacked in position up there, he's going to make the measurement to know where to cut the second board.
Using
Okay.
my extra set of hands.
Aha, see that? He's using that little edge that he cut into that board, and it's holding up the end of the tape measure. How clever of Tom.
93 3/4.
And you measured that right to that,
What I'm using, it doesn't make any difference what you use, as long as it's consistent.
right.
I measured to this edge.
Okay, to that
long
edge.
edge.
Gotcha,
I
gotcha.
mean, you
Okay,
could measure to something else, but then it gets a little tricky to
okay.
get it.
That makes sense to use that edge.
93 3/4.
93 3/4. All right.
All right, time to cut.
Let's go check this cut out. So we've seen Tom cut these boards before, but we're just going to watch him again because he already made the angle cut, as you can see on this board here. So now he's going to make the 90, what was it?
93 3/4.
93 3/4, and this is the other cut that he's going to make is just going to be a butt cut because it's going to go right up against the wall. So I think that's going to come right out here to this edge.
You go towards this edge.
Huh?
Go towards this edge.
Go toward this edge?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. How many are there?
That seems about right.
About.
Well, I would say it's exactly right, but I hate to
I hate to commit.
commit.
Good.
You want to double check that yourself?
Yeah,
I wish you would.
that's 2 inches.
Huh?
That's 2 inches. 95 3/4. Perfect.
All right. All right, perfect. And we all seen Tom do this before where he makes a pencil mark. There it is. Where is it?
2 plus a 16.
There. And then he's going to turn around and cut that through and bada bing. We'll be ready to go put that one up. And then you'll see him use that extra spare hand again up there to hold the board up while he's nailing it. Very good. Now, do you ever measure them now at this point to make sure they're the 93 3/4, or you just take it for granted that your pencil mark?
I'm going to put it up there and see how it fits. But let us not forget our 5% cut, our 5-degree cut. Remember, so that the corners, the corners, they're never going to be true because they've had to put tape and joint on it. Always are opened much further than you might think. So you got to cut this board off a little bit so that you're not fighting that on your.
So he just maneuvered his table by 5 degrees, and now he's going to come over and shave that off a little bit.
Just took off this portion of it on the top.
Right.
Okay.
But you've still got the whole portion up here that's still butt cut that'll go right up against the wall.
They'll go against the wall. And now this way too, to be short, it's a little easier to just trim the bottom.
Excellent.
Trip up and down the ladder.
So silly me, I thought Tom was ready to take that thing up there with his nail gun and put it in place. So Tom wagged his finger at me off camera. I didn't record that. Silly boy, he said, something like that to that effect. Actually, it was worse than that, but anyway, he says, no. Now that you've got the thing cut, you still come up and you try to lay it in place and you see if it's going to fit according to your intentions, because you may need to come back down and do something else to it. All right, so he's going to slide that thing in there, and he's going
Put it
to
on the
use,
tape.
and you can see that extra set of hands now that angle becomes. And then he's going to come over here and see what this end looks like. Oh, looks pretty, I mean, it looks pretty good to me, but he's the master crafter. He's judging now whether or not he's got to shave material off of somewhere or not before he starts nailing.
What I'm doing now is just trying to figure out exactly where this board should be
Uh-huh.
for the best fit.
I guess you're trying to determine if there is a position where it looks proper.
Right.
And if you're confident that you found one on this trip up the ladder, then you can come down, get your nail gun, go back up and start nailing it. Okay. That's such a good idea over there to do that. Never would have thought of it.
Since this is a little bit long,
Now from down here, it's looking like your ideal position.
yes, but at the top there's
Big gap.
an overhang.
Oh, okay.
This piece here, and you don't want that.
Okay.
So we're trying to do what we can to get rid of.
So you think you got to go take a little off the
I'm
other
gonna
end?
take a little bit off that end,
Okay.
just so it's not, not any binding.
Right.
By it.
And that's why he didn't take the nail gun up.
I didn't take none of it.
All right, lesson learned. All right, what's up now, Tom?
Well, what we're gonna do is there's a considerable gap, like maybe 1/8 of an inch on the top. So what I'm gonna do, and this is a little long on the top coming in. So what I'm gonna do is to raise this board up to the ceiling, and attach it so that I can
Match up on this side a lot easier.
Okay.
So I get that up higher. Shit.
And you did that right on a stud,
I did that in a stud, yes.
which is why he has all that.
High.
So he's influenced that piece to touch up against the ceiling a little bit flatly, I guess. And now, Tom, does that mean it is now sitting a little higher than that blue horizontal tape?
Yes.
Ha ha. Okay. Yeah, you can see that here. Not by a lot, but it's up there a little higher than the tape marking. And that was necessary to get it to be flush up against the ceiling, which hopefully will make it easier to match up the other piece that he's going to try to put up.
If it's a little bit short, you can live with that because you can caulk the seam. If it's a little bit long, you can't live with it
Right.
because there's no way to make it flush.
Right. So he went up and he shaved some material, angled his saw blade a little bit to take a little extra material off of the end of the right-hand board here so that it would fit in there better. You can see where the other end of it is being held up now by the backboard that Tom always keeps an open angle cut to act as a second set of hands. And there they are in action, holding up that end of the board. Now he's put in a couple nails here. And what he's left with is something that the caulk gun can fill in. So he's taken two boards and managed to fit them together so that in the end they will look perfect, even though they didn't want to line up as perfectly as the theory would tell you. He's doing something different now with shim.
Right, yeah, this is back to the issue over there. This board is probably at least 1/8 of an inch thicker up here than this one is.
Oh,
And that's why it's hard to get these to match up. I mean, the problem is also keeping it from going in too far.
right. Yep, because there's only so much caulk can do. The surfaces have to line up, and then the joint in between them can be filled in. So he just used that shim to hold that board in the correct angle and attitude while he nailed it. So after he pulled the shim out, the surfaces will remain lined up with each other. Another masterful technique.
One thing to be aware of is now that
attached to this end, we got down and put it in the right place. But you have to also consider the fact that that corner has to be right. So the height on that last tape needs to be adjusted so that it matches up with the other side.
Oh, okay.
So it's important that you don't kind of work down the board and get to the end and have it not be where it needs to be. So
All right.
I'll go down that end, make sure it's right, and then I'll come back and put a few more in.
Okay. So you're going to go down now along this other piece of wall here?
No, just make sure that
Oh,
that
oh,
one
oh.
is at 3 3/4 down.
And and that will be determined by that piece of blue horizontal tape. You want
Correct.
it laying right on there. Okay. Because when he puts this piece in, he wants the bottom edges to match up properly. So here he's positioning it by hand, so it goes on that tape, and then he's going over and he's putting the nails in. So he knows that the bottom edge is now where it's supposed to be. Now he can go back and put nails in the middle, and he knows that both ends have been put in their proper place, and the middle can be influenced up like you see him doing here with his hand, so that they fit more flush up against the ceiling, because the ends have been secured in their proper place, which is the first thing you want to do, right, Tom?
First thing I want to do is to make sure that it's as tight to the ceiling as it can be.
But then you start off by getting the two ends
Right.
done first.
Two ends in the middle, you've got to kind of work it
Right.
around the
Right.
ends.
That's what he's got done. At the end of that one has already been put in place. The end of that one's been put in place. Now he can push it up against the ceiling and nail it. And you can see how much, it's looking very nice and flush now with a very minimal gap to the ceiling. Now, when you first started doing this, I don't know, 40 years ago or whatever, how many ceilings were you unhappy with before you finally learned all your tricks and became the master you are
Still
now?
unhappy with them.
Oh, yeah?
Right, it still doesn't come out perfect, but, which is what I'm aiming for. You know you got caulk on your side, so that's pretty much what you do is come and caulking it and make it this straight. My first crown molding was actually with natural wood,
Oh,
so you couldn't caulk it.
oh boy, that was bold of you.
Where was that?
That was on a hookup, sir.
He's nailing them into.